Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of The Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Join our community of video viewers. I'm joined today by Byron York, our Chief Political Correspondent. And Byron, I want us to have a look at what appears to be the biggest controversy of the first week or two of the Trump administration, and that is on the freeze on grants and financial aid, etc. Caused a lot of confusion, or at least it caused a lot of controversy. What's going on here?
Well, you know, we're nearly 10 days into the second Trump administration, and this is the first controversy that really resembles the controversies we had in the first Trump administration. That is, the White House has done something that appears to be quite sweeping. Maybe they didn't fully think it through, or more likely they didn't fully explain what they were doing. And this has given Democrats a chance to unite and finally get their hands around something to criticize Trump for. So basically, you know, he's canceling Meals on Wheels, he's canceling senior centers, he's disrupting life, or worse, for millions and millions of Americans, and we don't even know why he's doing it. So the administration, the White House, has been in full explanation mode for the past 24, 48 hours, saying no, any individual benefit payments, any payments that are actually mandated by law, none of that's going to change. These are discretionary expenditures.
This is not a blanket pause on federal assistance and grant programs from the Trump administration. Individual assistance, that includes, I'm not naming everything that's included, but just to give you a few examples, Social Security benefits, Medicare benefits, food stamps, welfare benefits, assistance that is going directly to individuals will not be impacted by this pause.
But they haven't done a great job explaining it, and so they're facing a lot of criticism. And it's really, Democrats were overwhelmed by the first week of the Trump administration. They were simply beyond their ability to single out anything to really criticize. Well, now they've got something and they're running with it.
And you know, Chuck Schumer, for example, a minority leader now in the Senate, held a press conference with his leadership team, and they went after this.
Last night, President Trump plunged the country into chaos, a cruel, nasty, and illegal chaos. Without a shred of warning, the Trump administration announced a halt to virtually all federal grants and loans across the country.
Is it working for the Democrats?
I wouldn't say it's really working right now because it's just not as big a deal. And it's not being done in the larger context of Trump hysteria. If you remember, in the first few days of Trump 1, when Trump imposed what was called a Muslim travel ban,
right,
which was actually stopping arrivals from, I think it was a handful of maybe 6 majority Muslim nations that had high terrorist risk situations. The hysteria just went off the scale. The Obama holdover Justice Department made a big showy stand against the new president, and it just became this huge blowing up controversy. This has not really gotten to that level yet, in part because if you do listen to the White House's explanations, you understand what's going on here, and you realize that they should have explained it better, but what they're doing is actually reasonable.
There's also, and this is something we're looking into, the possibility of the people in the civil service, the deep state, or whatever one wants to call it, of actually doing a little bit of muddying the waters and, you know, a little bit of sabotage. The Medicaid website, for example, went up in the morning saying that payments would be delayed, etc. And in fact, that was not true, and it wasn't even due to happen until later in the afternoon, you would have thought that if there was someone of good faith in there, they would have checked with the White House whether this in fact happened. But it seems that the banner went up, and so there was quite a lot of generated confusion, which might have been cleared up before the thing happened. But you mentioned the White House press briefing, and it was the subject which Karoline Leavitt had to deal with, and I think it was her debut press briefing. How did she do in that briefing?
Well, I think she did very well. I think the first thing you have to do when considering the briefing, the first briefing, is compare it to every briefing of the prior 4 years of the Biden administration, to Karine Jean-Pierre, and who was either unable or unwilling to engage with reporters' problems, who was very, very what they called binder dependent. She depended on a binder filled with stock answers that she could open up quickly and just read an answer, as opposed to actually engaging with the reporter's questions. So there was none of that with Karoline Leavitt, who did a very good job. And now there were a bunch of questions on what we've just been talking about, this whole spending freeze thing. But she handled them quite well. And of course, that's what you got to do.
Right. She undertook. She was asked about whether there was a commitment to the truth.
Do you view yourself and your role as advocating on behalf of the president, or providing the unvarnished truth that is, not to lie, not to obfuscate to the American people?
I commit to telling the truth from this podium every single day. I commit to speaking on behalf of the President of the United States. That is my job.
The point you make about not having the binder in front of it is an interesting one, because, it's said that if you tell the truth, you don't have to try and remember everything that you've said before. It's when you have to, when you're not simply stating the facts and you've got a kind of case or a narrative to make, that you need the binder to remind you of the answer to give, which was the way that it was done in the Biden administration. But I want to turn just back to the question of freezing funds. It's being presented, for example, in an extraordinary news item in supposed news story in Politico, which refers to it as a full-scale Trump assault on the power of Congress, etc. But actually there's a serious question here of constitutional and statutory interpretation. The impression I have, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, that President Trump wants to get this to court pretty quickly. He's got a new head of OMB who was, there in the last year of his first administration. He's now back, who believe that if there is a democratic election and voters elect a president with a certain agenda, there needs to be a right of some review by the president about spending on things, and not simply having essentially to just push through. And this is based on the Impoundment Act of 1974. There's a serious question about where spending authority and spending obligation actually rests.
There is. And by the way, speaking of good faith, the Democrats are using this to try to delay the confirmation of Russell Vought as head of the OMB. But you're right. What happens is a lot of times Congress passes spending. Most congressional spending is already detailed by law in our entitlement programs for Social Security, for Medicare, and for Medicaid. Most of it is done that way. Now, Congress passes other spending, sometimes in broad tranches, and it sometimes gives the executive branch some discretion on spending this or that, or sometimes the executive branch just takes it. And I think that what the White House is trying to do here is go after this accretion of left-wing spending that has grown up over the years and try to re-examine some of that stuff, not to go to the mandated spending by Congress that they have to spend money on, but on discretionary matters that have really moved in an ideological direction over the years. And I would point to the billions of dollars given to NGOs in the whole border migration crisis of the Biden years as part of that. So I think it's entirely reasonable, as you suggest, for the White House to want to get some sort of review and to actually want to have a court confirm its
Right.
authority to review that.
That's all we have time for today. Byron, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be keeping a very close eye on this issue and all others as the Trump storm sweeps Washington with an extraordinary active administration. I want to thank all our viewers for joining us. Remember again to subscribe and like our YouTube channel. Byron, thanks for being with us, and we'll be back again next week.